Hi, Scorpio. Thank you for being here. I have to be honest. Before I even pulled the cards, this energy already felt incredibly deep. There's someone here who may have tried to convince themselves that these feelings would pass, that with enough time, enough distance, enough distractions, they could simply move on. But that's not what happened, because the more they tried to push these feelings away, the more their heart kept leading them back to you. And wow, these cards have a lot to say about that. So let's get into your reading. The first thing I'm noticing is that somebody has been watching from a distance for much longer than you realize. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that feels unhealthy. It's almost like they keep finding themselves drawn back to your energy, drawn back to your name, drawn back to your presence. And every time they try to convince themselves that they're fine, something reminds them of you all over again. The moment I see the Hermit here, I immediately feel a period of separation or silence that may have existed between the two of you. For some of you, this may have been physical distance. For others, emotional distance. But what stands out to me is that this person didn't spend that time forgetting about you. They spent that time thinking, reflecting, questioning themselves, questioning their decisions, questioning why this connection continued to linger in their heart when other connections seemed so easy to leave behind. And honestly, I think that realization surprised them. Because this person appears to be somebody who usually trusts logic more than emotions. They like certainty. They like control. They like being able to explain things. But you may have become one of the few things in their life that they couldn't fully explain. Okay, I also have the Page of Swords showing up here, and the energy around this card feels incredibly curious. This feels like somebody who checks in on you when nobody knows. Maybe they look at your social media. Maybe they ask mutual friends about you. Maybe they pretend they're completely focused on their own life, while secretly wondering what you're doing, how you're feeling, whether you're happy, whether you've moved on, whether somebody else has taken their place. And I keep hearing the words, I wonder if they still think about me. Because while this person may appear calm on the outside, there is a part of them that seems deeply interested in what is happening in your world. The interesting thing is that I don't think they intended for this to happen. I don't think they woke up one day and decided to become emotionally invested. It feels much more gradual than that. Like one memory became two memories became 10, and suddenly they found themselves thinking about you more than they were comfortable admitting. Wow. The moon is sitting right beside all of this energy, and there's something incredibly quiet about what I'm feeling. This person has emotions they haven't fully shared. Some of them may not have even shared these feelings with themselves. You know how sometimes people become so accustomed to hiding what they feel that eventually they stop recognizing their own emotions? That's what this feels like. For a long time, they may have told themselves that what they felt for you wasn't important, that it wasn't serious, that it would fade. But underneath all of that, something deeper continued to grow. And now they're beginning to notice it. Not all at once, not dramatically, but little by little. Almost like somebody slowly waking up from a dream and realizing that what they were searching for has been standing in front of them the entire time. I keep getting this image of someone replaying conversations, replaying moments, replaying memories they thought they had forgotten. And every time they revisit those memories, they see something new, something they missed before, something they didn't fully appreciate at the time, because distance has a strange way of revealing value. Sometimes people only understand the impact somebody had on their life after they've had enough space to see the bigger picture. And that's exactly what this feels like. The Six of Cups is here, and immediately I feel warmth, not obsession, not fantasy, warmth, comfort, familiarity. This card feels like somebody remembering how they felt around you, the way conversations flowed, the way you made them feel seen, the way your energy seemed to soften parts of them that nobody else could reach. And honestly, Scorpio, I think that's part of what they're struggling to ignore. Because connections like this don't come around every day. This person may have met many people, talked to many people, shared experiences with many people, yet when they look back, your presence still stands apart. There's something different about it, something that refuses to blend into the background. And the more they reflect, the harder it becomes to dismiss. The more they observe, the clearer things become. I feel like they're beginning to recognize qualities in you that they may have overlooked before. Your strength, your loyalty, your emotional depth, the way you continue moving forward even after disappointment, the way you protect your heart while still remaining capable of love. It's almost as if they're seeing you through an entirely different lens now, and that shift is creating something powerful inside of them. Not urgency, not pressure, awareness, a quiet emotional awakening that continues to grow every time they think about you. every time they remember you. Every time they try to convince themselves that none of this matters and realize they no longer believe that story. Because something inside of them has started telling the truth. And once that truth begins to surface, it becomes very difficult to hide from it. Honestly, Scorpio, the deeper I move into this reading, the more I feel like this person has spent a large part of their life hiding from their own emotions. Not because they wanted to be cold, not because they didn't care, but because somewhere along the way, they learned that vulnerability came with consequences. They learned that opening their heart could lead to disappointment. So instead of expressing what they felt, they became very skilled at managing it, containing it, locking it away where nobody could touch it, including themselves. And wow, the moment the King of Cups appears, I can feel that energy immediately. This person has always felt more than they allowed others to see. People may look at them and assume they're calm, stable, in control. But underneath that surface, there is an ocean of emotion that very few people have ever been allowed to access. The interesting thing is that they weren't expecting you to reach that place. They weren't looking for somebody who could get past their walls. In fact, I almost feel like they believed those walls would always stay exactly where they were. Yet somehow, Scorpio, your energy found its way through, not through force, not through pressure, just through authenticity. You showed up as yourself. And something about that stayed with them. Something about that felt safe. You know, I keep hearing that this person wasn't necessarily afraid of love. They were afraid of what love would require from them. Because love asks people to be honest. Love asks people to be seen. Love asks people to take risks emotionally. And for somebody who has spent years protecting their heart, that's not always easy. There is a moment I'm seeing here where they may have realized that what they felt for you was becoming impossible to categorize. At first, they may have called it attraction, then curiosity, then friendship. Then maybe they told themselves they were simply attached to the connection. But none of those explanations seemed to fully fit, because every time they tried to reduce these feelings to something simple, the feelings continued growing. And that brings me to the next card, the Death card. And honestly, this feels powerful. Not dramatic, not chaotic, powerful. Because what I'm seeing here is somebody slowly shedding an old version of themselves, an old emotional pattern, an old way of surviving. For some of you, this person may have spent years convincing themselves that they didn't need anyone, that depending on people was dangerous, that emotional distance was safer than emotional intimacy. Yet something has been changing, little by little, day by day. And I don't think this transformation happened because somebody forced them to change. I think it happened because their feelings for you kept confronting parts of themselves they could no longer ignore. The walls don't feel as comfortable anymore. The silence doesn't feel as protective anymore. The emotional distance that once felt safe is beginning to feel lonely. And that's a very different energy. Because once somebody starts recognizing that their defenses are no longer serving them, everything begins to shift. Okay, I also have this feeling that they've been surprising themselves lately. Maybe they catch themselves smiling when they think about you. Maybe they replay old conversations when nobody is around. Maybe they remember something you said months ago and suddenly understand it differently. There's something happening inside of them that feels very organic, very natural, like a flower slowly opening after a long winter. And right beside all of this sits the Ace of Cups. Wow, this card feels so gentle here. Because what I'm noticing isn't somebody trying to fight their emotions anymore. It's somebody beginning to acknowledge them, beginning to sit with them, beginning to admit that maybe these feelings are real. Maybe they're significant. Maybe they deserve attention instead of avoidance. I keep getting this image of somebody sitting alone with their thoughts. No distractions, no noise, no outside opinions, just them and their heart. And for the first time in a long time, they're actually listening. They're listening to what they feel instead of what they think they should feel. And that's creating a profound emotional shift. Because once a person starts listening to their heart honestly, it becomes very difficult to return to denial. The star is here as well, and I love the way this energy feels. There is hope attached to this connection. Not fantasy, not obsession. Hope. A quiet belief that maybe something meaningful exists here. Maybe this connection wasn't random. Maybe the impact you've had on their life happened for a reason. And I think they're beginning to realize that your presence has inspired growth within them. Not because you demanded it, but because being around you made them want to become more emotionally honest, more emotionally available, more emotionally present. There's a softness entering this person's energy that wasn't there before. A willingness to feel, a willingness to trust, a willingness to imagine possibilities they may have dismissed in the past. And honestly, Scorpio, I think that's what makes this reading feel so emotional. Because what I'm witnessing isn't just somebody developing feelings. It's somebody reconnecting with a part of themselves they buried a long time ago. A part that still believed in connection. A part that still believed in intimacy. A part that still wanted to be understood. You may not even realize how much of an impact you've had on this person. Because sometimes the most important transformations happen quietly. They happen behind closed doors. They happen in moments nobody else sees. And that's exactly what this feels like. Something inside of them is waking up. Something inside of them is softening. And perhaps for the first time in a very long time, they are no longer trying to convince themselves that they don't feel what they clearly feel. You know, something feels very different as I look at the cards sitting on the table right now. This isn't the energy of somebody wondering whether they care. This isn't the energy of somebody trying to figure out if you're important. That question feels like it has already been answered somewhere deep inside of them. What I'm seeing instead is somebody beginning to ask a completely different question. What would my life actually look like if I allowed this connection to become something real? And wow, that shift is significant because there is a big difference between feeling something and building something. A lot of people experience attraction. A lot of people experience chemistry, but not everybody reaches the point where they start imagining a future. Not everybody reaches the point where they begin measuring their decisions against the possibility of sharing a life with another person. Yet that's exactly where this energy seems to be moving. The Hierophant is standing out immediately, and the way it appears here feels very mature, very intentional. I don't feel somebody chasing excitement. I don't feel somebody looking for temporary validation. This feels like somebody slowing down long enough to ask themselves what truly matters. What kind of partnership do they want? What kind of love do they want? What kind of future do they want to create? And every time they follow those questions honestly, Scorpio, your energy somehow keeps appearing. It's almost like they can't think about stability without thinking about you. They can't think about consistency without thinking about you. They can't think about trust without thinking about you. Okay, there is something very practical happening inside this person's heart right now, which is interesting because emotions alone are usually not enough for them. This feels like somebody who needs to see how things work, how things fit together, how something can survive in the real world. And that's where the King of Pentacles comes in, because this card doesn't feel dreamy. It doesn't feel unrealistic. It feels grounded. It feels like somebody sitting quietly and considering what they can actually offer another person. I keep getting this image of someone reflecting on their life, looking at everything they've built, everything they've accomplished, everything they've worked for, and realizing that success feels different when there isn't somebody meaningful to share it with. There is a loneliness hidden inside that realization, not sadness, not regret, just awareness. The awareness that achievements are wonderful, but connection gives those achievements a different kind of meaning. And honestly, I think that's something this person is beginning to understand more clearly than ever before. Because when they picture their future, they don't seem focused on appearances. They're not imagining perfection. They're imagining partnership. They're imagining loyalty. They're imagining somebody who stays, somebody they can trust, somebody who understands them beneath the surface. And every time they explore those thoughts, your presence feels difficult to separate from the picture. Wow. The Ten of Pentacles is creating a very interesting energy here, because this card feels less like fantasy and more like vision. This person may find themselves thinking further ahead than they usually do, further ahead than they're comfortable admitting, thinking about what life could become, thinking about the type of foundation they want to create, thinking about what it would feel like to wake up beside somebody who truly understands them, to have somebody in their corner, to build traditions together, memories together, experiences together. And what strikes me is that these thoughts seem to arrive naturally. Nobody is forcing them. Nobody is convincing them. It's almost as if their heart has quietly started including you in places where they never expected to see anyone. You know, I think this surprises them sometimes, because there may have been periods in their life when commitment felt restrictive, when long-term plans felt intimidating, when independence seemed easier than emotional investment. Yet something about this connection keeps softening those beliefs. Something about you makes partnership feel less like a sacrifice and more like a possibility. And that's a very different energy, because people rarely change their perspective unless something meaningful inspires that change. The Four of Wands is here too, and I can't ignore the warmth coming from it. There is a feeling of comfort surrounding this connection, a feeling of peace, not because everything has been perfect, not because there haven't been challenges, but because somewhere beneath all of it, This person feels at home with you, and that's a powerful realization, especially for somebody who may have spent years searching for belonging in different places, different relationships, different experiences, only to discover that true comfort isn't something you find everywhere. Sometimes it appears unexpectedly. Sometimes it appears in the presence of one particular person. I keep seeing them imagining simple moments, not grand gestures, not dramatic scenes, simple moments, laughing together, sharing stories, spending quiet time in the same room, supporting one another through life's challenges, growing older together, building something meaningful one day at a time. And honestly, Scorpio, that's what makes this energy feel so genuine, because they're not focused on temporary excitement anymore. They're focused on sustainability. They're focused on what lasts. They're focused on what remains when the initial rush settles and real life begins. There is a growing desire here to create something solid, something dependable, something that doesn't disappear the moment things become difficult. And as these cards continue unfolding, I can't help but notice how much this person has evolved emotionally. The questions they're asking themselves are different now. The things they value are different now. The things they once overlooked suddenly seem important. Because when somebody begins to picture another person standing beside them years from now, it changes the way they see everything. It changes the way they evaluate choices. It changes the way they define success. And perhaps most importantly, it changes the way they understand love. Because this no longer feels like a feeling they can place neatly into a box and set aside. It feels like something that is slowly becoming part of the future they're beginning to imagine whenever they allow themselves to dream honestly. Something feels heavier here, Scorpio. Not heavy in a negative way. Heavy in the sense that somebody is finally allowing themselves to look at the truth without running from it. And honestly, that may be one of the hardest things a person can do. Because it's easy to focus on what somebody else did. It's easy to point at circumstances. It's easy to blame timing. But what I'm seeing in these cards is somebody turning the mirror toward themselves. And for some reason, the moment I look at judgment, I keep feeling this deep sense of realization. Like they're replaying certain moments in their mind and seeing them differently than they did before. Conversations, choices, silences, missed opportunities. Things they justified back then suddenly don't make as much sense anymore. It's almost like they have stepped outside of the situation long enough to finally understand how everything looked from your side. And wow, that awareness doesn't feel comfortable, but it feels necessary, because growth rarely happens when somebody believes they did everything perfectly. Growth begins when a person becomes honest enough to admit where they could have done better, where fear made their decisions, where pride spoke louder than their heart, where avoidance created distance that never needed to exist. I keep hearing somebody say, I understand it now, not because somebody explained it to them, not because they were forced to see it, because life itself became the teacher. Certain experiences entered their world, certain lessons unfolded, certain disappointments happened, and through all of it, they started connecting the dots. You know, sometimes people don't fully appreciate what they had until life gives them something to compare it to. And I feel like this person has been through experiences that forced them to reconsider everything they thought they wanted, everything they thought mattered, everything they thought was worth prioritizing. Okay, justice is sitting here and the energy feels incredibly honest, not defensive, not argumentative, honest. This person seems to be reaching a place where excuses no longer satisfy them. The old stories don't satisfy them. The reasons they once gave themselves don't satisfy them, because somewhere deep inside, they know that there were moments when they could have shown up differently. Moments when they could have communicated more openly. Moments when they could have been more vulnerable. Moments when they could have chosen connection instead of distance. And I think that's why this energy feels so mature. Because they are no longer trying to protect their image. They're trying to understand the truth. The truth about themselves. The truth about what happened. The truth about what this connection means to them. And that's a very different place to operate from. Honestly, Scorpio, I think one of the biggest changes happening here is that this person no longer wants to win. They want to understand. There was a time when being right may have felt important. Protecting their ego may have felt important. Maintaining control may have felt important. But those priorities seem to be shifting. Because what good is being right if it costs you something meaningful? What good is protecting your pride if it creates separation from somebody who matters? Those are the kinds of questions I feel them wrestling with. And the answers aren't coming from their mind anymore. They're coming from somewhere much deeper. Wow. Temperance is bringing such a calming energy into this reading. Because despite everything this person has been processing, I don't see chaos. I see patience. I see somebody trying to approach things differently than they have before, trying not to react from old wounds, trying not to repeat old patterns, trying not to make decisions from fear, and that takes effort, more effort than most people realize, especially when somebody has spent years responding to situations the same way. The energy around them feels almost reflective, like they're carefully examining which parts of themselves need to stay and which parts need to be released, which habits are helping them, which habits are hurting them, which fears are protecting them, which fears are holding them back. Because there is a growing awareness that if they truly want something different, they cannot keep showing up as the same version of themselves. And I think that's where much of this transformation is coming from. Not because somebody demanded change, not because somebody gave them an ultimatum, because they genuinely want to become better, better at communicating, better at trusting, better at expressing what they feel, better at handling emotional intimacy. There is humility in that realization, a willingness to learn, a willingness to grow, a willingness to admit that they don't have all the answers. And honestly, that's beautiful. The Six of Swords feels especially meaningful here, because I keep seeing somebody mentally leaving behind a chapter of their life, not forgetting it, not pretending it never happened, simply understanding that they cannot stay there forever. They cannot keep carrying every old disappointment into every new experience. They cannot keep expecting the future to mirror the past. They cannot keep allowing old pain to dictate every choice they make. Something inside of them wants peace, real peace, not avoidance disguised as peace, not emotional numbness disguised as peace, actual peace, the kind that comes from acceptance, the kind that comes from honesty, the kind that comes from facing difficult truths and surviving them. And as I sit with this energy, I can't ignore the feeling that there may be words this person has wanted to say for quite some time. Words that stayed trapped behind hesitation, behind uncertainty, behind fear. Because sometimes people believe they need to have everything figured out before they speak, before they apologize, before they reach out, before they tell somebody how they really feel. Yet life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes all that's needed is sincerity, a genuine willingness to show up as you are. And the energy here feels like somebody getting closer and closer to that place. Closer to honesty, closer to accountability, closer to becoming the version of themselves they wish they had been earlier. Because if there is one thing these cards keep showing me, it's that this person does not want to keep carrying the same story forever. They're beginning to understand that some distances are meant to teach, some lessons are meant to change you, and some realizations arrive only after the heart becomes brave enough to tell the truth. There comes a point when feelings become too large to comfortably live in silence. And Scorpio, that's exactly where this energy seems to be arriving. Not suddenly, not impulsively, not because somebody woke up one morning and decided everything had changed. This feels more like a pressure building over time, a truth that has been sitting beneath the surface for so long that it can no longer remain hidden. And honestly, as I look at these cards, I keep feeling somebody standing at the edge of a decision, not a decision about how they feel. That part feels clear. The decision is whether they are brave enough to finally let you see it. Wow. The Eight of Wands appears, and immediately the energy begins moving. After all of this reflection, after all of this inner work, after all of these quiet realizations, there is movement, and I don't mean rushed energy. I mean the kind of movement that happens when somebody finally understands that waiting forever is no longer an option. Because there are moments in life when silence starts becoming heavier than honesty, when holding everything inside becomes more exhausting than simply speaking the truth. And I feel like this person is getting closer to that realization. You know, I keep seeing somebody picking up their phone and putting it back down, thinking about reaching out, thinking about what they would say, thinking about how you might respond, replaying different scenarios in their head, not because they don't care, because they care so much, because suddenly every word feels important, every choice feels important, every possibility feels important. Okay, there is also vulnerability here that feels very real. The Page of Cups doesn't feel like somebody trying to impress you. It doesn't feel like somebody rehearsing a perfect speech. It feels much softer than that. It feels like somebody wanting to be genuine, wanting to show you the part of themselves they normally keep hidden, the part that still hopes, the part that still dreams, the part that still believes in emotional connection despite everything they've been through. And honestly, I think that might be the scariest part for them, not expressing their feelings, being seen while expressing them. Because once those feelings leave their heart and enter the world, they become real. There is no hiding behind uncertainty anymore, no pretending. No avoiding, no distractions, just honesty. And that's a vulnerable place for anyone to stand, especially somebody who has spent so much time protecting themselves. I keep hearing them wonder about you. Wonder whether your heart still has room for them. Wonder whether the connection they continue feeling is something you still feel too. Wonder whether enough time has passed to change everything, or whether some part of what existed between the two of you is still alive beneath the surface. There is curiosity here, but there is also hope, careful hope, the kind that walks slowly because it doesn't want to break. The Fool is showing up beside all of this energy, and wow, there is something beautiful about it. Because despite all the fear, despite all the uncertainty, despite all the questions, something inside this person keeps whispering that they need to take a chance. Not because they know exactly what will happen, because some opportunities feel too meaningful to ignore. I almost feel like they're standing on the edge of a brand new chapter, looking out at a future they cannot fully see. And for somebody who likes certainty, that's not always comfortable. Yet the strange thing is, they don't seem as afraid of the unknown as they used to be. Because the possibility of remaining exactly where they are feels even harder. The possibility of never knowing, never trying, never speaking, never finding out, that feels heavier than the risk itself. And that's a huge shift. Because this reading started with somebody observing from a distance. It moved through self-reflection. It moved through emotional awakening. It moved through accountability. And what I'm seeing here feels like a heart that is becoming increasingly unwilling to stay hidden. Honestly. Scorpio, this person appears tired of carrying conversations that only exist inside their own head. Tired of imagining what they should have said. Tired of wondering what could happen. Tired of holding feelings that want somewhere to go. The energy feels restless, not chaotic, restless. Like something is ready to be expressed. And the moment the Lovers appears, everything becomes incredibly clear. Not because this card answers every question, but because it reveals what sits underneath all of this. Choice, connection, truth. This person keeps arriving at the same place no matter how far they wander, no matter how much they analyze, no matter how much they try to approach things logically. Their heart continues bringing them back here, back to this connection, back to what they feel when they think about you, back to the possibility that what exists between the two of you may be far more meaningful than they originally allowed themselves to believe. And wow, there is something almost peaceful about that realization. Because for so long, it feels like they were searching for answers outside themselves, trying to figure everything out intellectually, trying to solve emotions like a puzzle. Yet the answers they were looking for may have been sitting in their heart the entire time. I keep feeling this image of somebody taking a deep breath. The kind of breath people take right before they finally say what they've been wanting to say. Right before they step forward, right before they stop hiding. And whether this becomes a message, a conversation, a phone call, or a moment shared face to face, the energy feels centered around authenticity, around sincerity, around somebody wanting to be known for who they truly are rather than who they pretend to be. Because at the end of the day, Scorpio, some truths refuse to stay buried forever. Some feelings continue growing every time they're ignored. And some connections leave such a lasting imprint on the heart that eventually all roads seem to lead back to one simple question. What happens when two people finally stop hiding what they feel? All right, Scorpio, that's all I have for you today. And honestly, this reading felt less like a prediction and more like watching someone's heart slowly wake up. Whether this message was meant for your situation or simply offered you a moment of reflection, I hope it brought you the clarity you needed. Thank you for allowing me to read this energy with you. Thank you for being here. And most of all, thank you for continuing to choose yourself through every chapter of your journey. Take care of your heart. Trust your intuition. Keep moving forward one step at a time, and I'll see you again very soon in the next reading. Bye, my beautiful Scorpio.